Is a goat better than a fox? And we find out what happens when a punter meets a ring general, so just keep watching. Let's just keep it real, it is a shame when we reach the last chapter in a great story, but we'll get to that in a minute. So let's start with the matches from BackLash, where we just keep hunting for new blood as Solo Sikoa brings in Jeff Cobb to take out LA Knight and hands an easy victory to Jacob Fatu off of a hip attack and a mighty moonsault to retain the US title. But briefly on SmackDown, it was Knight and Priest who were forced to team up, and they certainly argued a lot before, during, and after the match, with Knight finally finishing it off after countering a Samoan spike into a BFT to get the win. So Knight and Priest go to 2-0 in traditional tags, but Sikoa and Fatu are somehow 0-3, and Sikoa also picks up a fine for attacking before the bell. And of course, the ref ring the bell, so she gets a "what were you thinking?" But then after the match, Knight and Priest continued to argue, with Knight pushing Priest. That started a scuffle where Fatu joined in and landed several hip attacks on both men. But then McIntyre came out of nowhere to finish off Fatu with a claymore, so we'll have to give fines to Knight for instigating, and then also Fatu and McIntyre for joining in. So while Knight and Priest arguing didn't cost them, it also distracted from the match quite a bit, so this one gets a not okay. So Fatu is the ones, and he had quite a fight on his hands in this one, but he did Samoan drop Damian Priest on top of the barricade, and later had a pop-up Samoan drop and a hip attack on McIntyre. But he was the one that started an incredible series with a Swanton bomb on McIntyre, only for him to get BFT'd by Knight. But then Priest sent Knight south of heaven into a chokeslam, and then Priest got claymored by McIntyre. However, Priest was the one that nearly got a fall when he fell on top of Knight, only for McIntyre to break it up. But this one came down to the end, where Knight was about to end Fatu with a megastar elbow through the announce table, only for Solo Sikoa to arrive and move Fatu off of the announce table. And so Knight went after him, and then a new man, Jeff Cobb, came out of the crowd and attacked Knight, throwing him off of the barricade and off of the ring post to hand Fatu that easy victory. So Fatu does go to 1-3 in multi-person singles matches, and this is his first successful title defense. So we'll call Priest and McIntyre the twos, because after McIntyre claymored Knight, it was Priest who pulled the ref out of the ring, so these two fought by and on top of equipment boxes on the floor, which led to Priest landing a south of heaven chokeslam through tables beneath the boxes, which took out both men for the rest of the match, so they both dropped to 1-3 in multi-person singles matches. So that makes Knight the threes, as he was the one who got off to an early start with a megastar elbow, but just when he looked to have swung things back in his direction at the end, it was Sikoa and Cobb that ruined it. So he has the exact same record of 1-3 in multi-person singles matches. So this match received multiple "this is awesome" chants, and it is hard to argue with that, particularly after that south of heaven chokeslam. And with everything being legal here, the addition of Cobb was a big surprise to everyone, and especially Jacob Fatu. So we'll have to see how this plays out, but for tonight, it gets a double okay. Next, we just keep manhandling yourself as Becky Lynch fakes a manhandle slam to try a roll-up, only for Lyra Valkyria to reverse her into her own to retain the women's IC title. So Lyra is the ones, and she embarrassed Becky early on with a rocking horse and then 3 surfboard submissions in a row, and she kept the pressure on with all of her big moves, including a sit-out powerbomb, a superplex, and a leg drop off of the top rope, followed by a spinning heel kick and moonsault combo. And she even landed a Nightwing, but the ref had left the ring to grab the turnbuckle pad that Becky had removed earlier. So the count was simply too slow and kept the match going. But this came down to a battle of pinning combos, and she was the one that came out on top. So this is her 5th successful title defense, and certainly her most prestigious of all these wins, and she is 6-1 in one-on-one matches. So that makes Becky the twos, and this was her first one-on-one match since losing twice to Liv in rapid succession last May, and she shook off the rust to at least look the equal of Lyra. but she resorted to dirty tricks, grabbing the rope to try to gain leverage to score a pin, but the ref saw her and stopped the count, and she also grabbed a steel chair, which the ref removes, so that allowed Becky to expose that turnbuckle, and it almost worked, except she slammed Lyra's head up into the middle turnbuckle instead of the exposed one, so that perhaps made the difference when Lyra kicked out of a manhandle slam. Speaking of which, it was very strange for Becky to opt not to do a manhandle slam when she was in position to do so, instead going for a roll-up, and that cost her as she suffered her first one-on-one loss of the year, going to 0-1. Well, after the match, Becky immediately started pounding on Lyra and then locked in a disarmor until officials had to come in and break it up, so that will be a fine for Becky. This one also got a "This is awesome" chant, but these two were not quite as sharp here, probably because they were just so mad at each other, but it's also to be expected for someone without a one-on-one match in 11.5 months, but it looks like we'll need to see this match again, so for tonight it gets an okay. Third, we just keep making grande plans, as after all 3 Judgment Day members get ejected, Finn Balor distracts the ref, leaving El Grande Americano to headbutt Penta with his loaded mask, so Dom retains with a frog splash. And that makes Dom the ones, and he pulled off a shocking suicide DDT, turning a suicide dive into a DDT onto the floor. And he also landed in Oblivion, but it apparently is not nearly as good as Liv's because it could not score the fall. But he did still get a lot of help in this one, which was good enough for his second defense versus Penta, and he still only has one-on-one wins against Penta, so he is 2-3. And that means Penta is the 2s, and he probably would have won this one off of a Mexican Destroyer on the apron, but Dom fell to the floor instead, and the Judgment Day came out with Carlito distracting the ref and Balor to get a steel chair, but he took just a little bit too long, so all 3 of them got ejected, which will cause them to get 1-week suspensions. So Balor distracted the ref a second time, which allowed El Grande Americano to appear for that headbutt, making Penta an easy target, so this is his 4th IC title loss already, but he drops to 7-3-1 in one-on-one matches. Surprisingly, I have to agree with Michael Cole that Dom is starting to gain some momentum, improving inside the ring, but yet he still needed an army to help him to keep the title, so for now we simply have to give this a not okay. Next, we just keep losing the field position battle as Pat McAfee tries to win with a sleeper, but Gunther locks one in of his own to put that Jagoff to sleep. So Gunther is the ones, and he mostly just played with his opponent here, chopping him over and over again. And if not for Michael Cole inserting himself into this match, Gunther may never have had any issues at all. But when it came to crunch time, Gunther's sleeper was way too strong for a mere punter, so Gunther improves to 6-1 in one-on-one matches. And that makes McAfee the 2s, as he stupidly tried to match Gunther chop for chop, and even when he used his biggest weapon, his right foot, he was still no match for him, because after several kicks, including a punt, he only got a 1 count on Gunther. And even after a straight right boot and a super kick, Gunther was able to catch and counter another super kick right into a powerbomb. So even with Cole getting himself into the ring and after yelling at Gunther and then trying to steal a win for McAfee by grabbing Gunther's leg on a pin attempt, which of course will cost Cole a fine, McAfee just had no chance here, so he is 0-1. And yes, McAfee showed some heart by kicking out of a powerbomb and then also getting out of a Boston Crab and a couple sleepers, but Gunther was simply inevitable here, so this is what happens when an announcer messes with the ring general, so it has to get a not okay. And lastly, we just keep seeing a goat outfox a snake, because after Randy Orton RKO's R-Truth, John Cena delivers a low blow and a title belt to the Dome to retain the undisputed WWE Championship. But first on SmackDown, Mark Nash continued to disrespect Cena with his weak ring entrance, so Cena again made him fix it, only for a hooligan to throw a beer bottle at Cena. So Cena of course showed courage and class without retaliating and simply proceeded to say that your childhood dies tomorrow, which was now last night. Anyways, after he beats Orton, and so then he spelled out why that he is the definition of hustle, loyalty, and respect, while Orton is the antithesis of those words. But after Cena eloquently made all of his points, a hooded figure tried to RKO Cena from behind, only to be thwarted and hit with an AA, but that was not Orton. So of course he then appeared from behind with an RKO out of nowhere to stand tall to end the show. So of course Orton has to pick up a fine, and so does whoever that masked man was, if we can ever figure out just who he was. But despite all of that disrespect here, Cena of course earns an okay. But let's get back to the match. Well, there are just too many highlights here, so let's run through the top ones, because after Cena tried to leave the ring, Orton ran him down and landed 20 punches to his head. Then they traded 4 straight sleepers before Orton stopped it with a back suplex. Cena hit his 5-knuckle shuffle, but then Orton avoided the AA for a power slam. Then maybe in the move of the match, Orton grabbed Cena's neck in midair during an AA for an RKO, sending both men to the mat for quite a long time. Cena then won an exchange of strikes with another AA. As Cena was doing the 5 moves of doom, Orton stopped the second shoulder tackle with an RKO out of nowhere. Then Cena avoided a punt to land another AA. But after Cena missed a punt of his own, he then avoided an RKO by accidentally pushing Orton into the ref. That allowed Cena to land an RKO of his own, but there was no ref there for a count. Cena then grabbed the title from ringside, but Orton was ready with an RKO. At ringside, after Cena pushed Orton into the ref, knocking the ref into the post, Orton AA'd Cena on top of the announce table, and it eventually collapsed, but Orton followed that up with an AA through a table. And when they got back into the ring, Orton hit another RKO, but another ref had to run in, so it took too long and we only got a 2 count. Then Cena grabbed the title and missed Orton, but hit this second referee, which will give him a 2-week suspension, and this led right into an RKO, and the crowd counted the 10, but of course, there was no ref. WWE officials then ran down to check on that ref, but Orton was not in the mood to be yelled at by Aldis, so he RKO'd him, and then RKO'd all 4 other officials, which will cost him a 1-month suspension. So as Orton lined up for another punt attempt, he was stopped by R-Truth, so Truth pleaded with Orton, only to be RKO'd, so Cena had the opening to finish it off and retain the title. So Cena is the ones, and this was his first successful title defense, and he is 2-0 in one-on-one matches. And that makes Orton the 2s, and he seemed to have it won a few times here, but no such luck, so he just keeps alternating wins and losses and is 2-2 in one-on-one matches. Well, if you're counting at home, that was 5 AAs and 12 RKOs during this match, and that somehow didn't work out for Orton, but it does work to keep the GOAT on top in this final battle between a pair of legends. So Cena should at least be very appreciative of his #1 fan in R-Truth, so I'm sure the next time he sees him, he'll certainly reward him for his efforts. But for tonight, while we'd like to see something a bit cleaner, it still gets us to see our last real champion, so we have to give it an okay. But that's not all, because we've got to quickly run through the rest of the matches on SmackDown, so we'll start with Zelina Vega recruiting the MIA Alexa Bliss for a tag match, and it paid off because she assisted on a Code Red against Piper, and then Alexa landed an Abigail DDT on Chelsea to win the match. So this random group is 1-0, but Chelsea and Piper are 0-2 in traditional tags. It is certainly unreal that Alexa has not been on TV since the Elimination Chamber, but she was as sharp as ever, so this gets an okay. Next, with Jade about to attempt a Jaded on Nia Jax, Naomi came to ringside and attacked Tiffany Stratton, where she threw her into the steel steps to pick up a fine, so Jade got distracted and then Nia blindsided her to land a senton and an annihilator to win the match. And this was a much needed win for Nia, and it was her first win since January 20th, and she lost 5 straight matches of any type before that, but she is now back to 500 at 3-3 in one-on-one matches, and more importantly, she becomes the #1 contender. but Jade drops to 1, 2, and 1 in one-on-one matches where she simply needs to keep the eye on the prize instead of on the caution tape, so this one gets a not okay. Next, despite or maybe because of the Street Profits still being less than 100% from their TLC match, both them and Fraxiom flew for all of their big moves, but their injuries slowed them down enough for Ford to miss a frog splash and allow Fraxiom to hit a Catapulta Infernal, which is a dropkick and leg sweep combo, to get the win in this non-title match. So Fraxiom is 3-0 in 3 weeks on the main roster, while the Profits take their first loss to go to 4-1 in traditional tags. Well, Nick Aldis never should have made this match because the Profits were simply there to celebrate, and DIY agreed with that as they attacked both the Machine Guns and Fraxiom backstage afterwards, telling the latter that only terrible people would do that to the Profits. So DIY does have to get 1 week suspension each, but while this was a good match, these injuries keep it from the top level, so it still gets an okay. Next, the Miz's plan didn't go according to plan as Aleister Black avoids Carmelo Hayes' sneak attack that caused him to knock the Miz to the floor, and then Hayes was caught in a roll-up for Black to get the win. So the Miz went back into the ring after the bell, but Black was not having any of it with a devastating Black Mass. So he does pick up a fine, but I'm sure that was very satisfying, and he is 2-0 in 2 weeks, while Carmelo Hayes drops to 3-4-1 in one-on-one matches. Well, this was a fine match until the Miz kind of threw things off, but it was good enough to get an okay. After Santos Escobar set up Rey Fenix backstage, that allowed Angel and Berto to slam him into an equipment box and pound him until the officials broke it up. Well, we got another tag match in a very tag-heavy night, but all 3 members of Legado del Fantasma have to pick up 1 week suspensions. But Fenix got revenge with a goodbye amigo kick and a tope con hilo, allowing his new partner Andrade to deliver the message, so they get the win to go to 1-0 in traditional tags, but Los Garza falls to 1-5 in traditional tags, and Escobar's frustration set in, yelling at Berto for losing, despite Escobar being the one that actually cost Berto a pin earlier when he distracted the ref. So Berto was done, and he slapped Escobar's hand away as he pressed it into his chest. So those two had to stare down before leaving, and it feels like both teams had more left in the tank, but it was still pretty good, so we'll give it an okay. And just one thing to note beyond the mat for SmackDown, Charlotte Flair said she had the greatest women's match in WrestleMania history, and she enjoyed her WrestleMania moment so much that she was announcing her path back to the WWE Women's Championship, which caused the fans to boo her. And so Charlotte said that they were being disrespectful, but she gave them one more chance, but they kept booing, so Charlotte slammed down that mic and left. And then backstage, Aldis continued the crowd's complete lack of respect for their queen by yelling at her, and just when she walked away and made it to her vehicle, Alexa Bliss slammed the door in her face and said hi. So whatever could that mean for those two? Well, we would love to give Charlotte an okay here, but this is about the crowd's disrespect, and all of them deserve a double not okay. And that gives us 11 matches and 4 successful title defenses, which makes for quite a successful weekend. And if you missed the SportsZu's predictions for BackLash, be sure to go right on over here to see if he kept his 80% pledge. And if you do, just like that doctor can finally tell his biggest rival that you can't see me anymore, well, this one gets an okay. And cut. All right, Doc, time for your performance review. Okay, let's just say we have a lot to talk about. Well, I'm sure it's double okay, right? I think it's safe to say that it's not okay. Wait a sec, is this thing still on?